It's a little noisy in the lobby. Well, good morning. Are we having fun yet? Their timing is impeccable, isn't it? The word from the police is that they are doing the tour of different denominations of spiritual practice, including Christian ones that aren't of their ilk. And the officer said, the best thing to do is don't pay them much attention, because they'll get bored and go away. So that's what we're going to do. Isn't it interesting how our organisms respond to such a thing? Please raise your hand if you're experiencing or have experienced any anger. How about fear? How about confusion? What am I missing? There's a lot of others, I'm sure. What? Sadness, of course. I've had some sadness, yeah. Anything, what else? Love and compassion? Yeah. Oh, they left. How disappointing. Shit. We were just kind of getting going. They're like trick-or-treaters. They want to get to lots of different places. Poor guys. Poor guys. So, any other reaction, any other responses? Compassion, loving kindness, equanimity, ease, frustration, amusement, fear, curiosity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, actually, that's. Would you run this over, Nick? Test 1 2 1 2. Isn't this cute? Hi. I can wear this on my chin as a kind of goatee. It takes the popping out of it when we speak. So it's a pom pom if we're going to do a.
I don't know if I want to touch it. Where's the head? How do I grab it? Who was speaking? I didn't. Who was speaking?
We couldn't make this a career. I just.
Okay. Anybody else have anything you want to say? Please, let her have the mic.
I was feeling sad because thinking of.
Please turn it right toward your mouth. Yeah, there you go.
Even some people in my family are very averse to actually listening to what Buddhism is about, that it isn't something that they need to hate or feel afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
It made me feel empathy for all the other people who've been subjected to such anger and hate. Other, people who are Muslims, people who are walking into Planned Parenthood for health care.
Yeah.
That's what came to my mind. I feel shook up.
Kathy, did you want the mic? Would you bring it up here? Just hang on just a second. To those of you joining us on the internet, we had 4 quasi-Christian protesters out front, men, screaming at us as we came in that we're going to hell, etc. Please.
Well, my own feeling is that it isn't right or in keeping with our practice just to ignore them or be indifferent or not engage, that we should listen to what they're so angry about without taking it on, whatever their criticism is. And they were yelling about the effect on the neighborhood, so I wondered whether they came from the immediate neighborhood, and no? Okay. And I just wondered whether this community should be a little more engaged with the neighborhood if people are having an adverse reaction to this presence. That's all. What was the anniversary? What did they say about it? Well, they said, "You're a bunch of white hip yuppies that don't belong in this neighborhood." And I asked him, "Are you from this neighborhood?" He said, "Yes, I am. I've grown up here all my life." He did say that, yeah.
I noticed an interesting thing because I stood out there for about half hour, and they seemed to get energized by laughter or trying logical response. And I just basically watched them with a great deal of compassion, and I bowed to them at one point. And the only response I got, because they were clearly making eye contact with me, and they weren't very abusive to me. And I had my hands over my heart as well, because I was actually feeling a great deal of sadness for them because there was so much hatred. And I just felt sad. And the only verbal response I got is when I bowed is, "That's not working for me." That was the response, which I thought interesting. That's not working for me. Mm-hmm.
Way in the back. Way in the back.
I was a little bit confused originally because I know religious people.
Can you hold the mic?
I know some religious people and they wouldn't act like that. I'm a strong person, so when people are yelling at me like that and when I walk up to the doors, it's hard not to get involved or to say or to think something that I try not to think. That's not the way I want to go. Mm-hmm. Whatever religion they're believing in isn't of mainstream and not of the neighborhood, of any religion I've seen.
didn't listen to them for very long, but what I did hear them saying, I found almost amusing because they were making assumptions about what we believed that weren't correct. And my thought was, you should come in and hear what we're saying, because what you're suggesting we believe is not accurate.
I did invite them in and for coffee. And I considered taking coffee to them, but I thought that that might not be wise. And after I spoke with the police officer, I realized that wouldn't be wise. Because they weren't interested in engaging. They wanted to be heard, but heard at a shout. I went up to them and tried to talk to them, and they did not engage in conversation at all.
What did they want? If, they didn't suggest what they thought we should be doing. What did they want?
That is the topic of my Dharma talk today. What do fundamentalists want?
I couldn't help but notice that there was one other aspect to the message, quote unquote. It was not spiritual. There were personal insults that people took directly. I saw it many times. Mm-hmm. A lot of attacks, assumptions about people's sexuality, about their manliness, et cetera, et cetera. Things about our community. These were cultural attacks as well. So.
There was someone, there we go, to the back. Yeah. Oh, good,
May I
sorry.
quickly? I just want to share that for me, not even necessarily going outside and witnessing firsthand, I personally was experiencing a quickening of like what's happening globally and how in this very indirect way I'm being affected in this moment, and how I can just imagine other beings throughout who haven't had the comfort and safety of experiencing this type of hatred while I was tending to flowers. I just really felt just that paradox, I suppose, of what's occurring globally and where I'm at, and just wanting to extend compassion and understand that we do need to have a conversation about this. And I'm not sure if just passively being witness is the best place, but just noticing like where we're at and how the world is being affected as well. So just making that observation.
Thank you. And gentleman at the back.
I heard them saying various things that we were, and the one that I kept hearing repeated over and over, and maybe it was just to touch my own place, was that we're all going to hell forever. We're going to roast in hell forever. So my feeling was that it was fear. They wanted to touch some place of fear in us, because they were that was coming from them, and that was their way, that was their path to whatever they believed in. And that's not my way, the fear thing.
Yeah, what I see with that type of behavior, it's
Would you hold the mic right up? There we go.
Yeah, I see that type of behavior as thuggery, and it's been practiced for a long time, thuggery, and you'll see it online too. If you say something bright and intelligent, and you'll get the thuggery type of response. And it's the way I look at it. I try to understand it, but it's just thuggery. They're trying to scare you, and it's worked and it's happened, and with tragic results when it does happen. So.
Damien, please. Let's take another couple of minutes and then we'll sit for a while.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, obviously, with the recent events in the last couple of days in Paris that it really brings up this quality of interconnectedness. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have expected this when I was driving here today, right? And here we are in this reminder of this interconnectedness with the whole matrix of, so.
You know, it was interesting. I was sitting here kind of just like, what just happened. I engaged with them for a bit, and then it kind of hit me.
Can you hold it closer? Thanks.
Yeah, it kind of just hit me that sometimes I, hate things about myself like they were hating us, like an inwardly directed kind of feeling like that. So that's where I feel this like, oh, I feel for you guys. I don't put it out. Maybe like you do, I don't maybe use the same words, but there's this feeling of, wow, okay, I have some of that too. So that kind of hit me.
I recognize this because I was in a cult for 20 years, and they're in a cult. It's the way you create in-groups and out-groups, and we're the out-group. And so someone asks, what are they doing? They're creating an in-group. This is for themselves. And since we're talking about fundamentalism and jihadism and so forth, this is how you create an in-group. And we're witnessing.
This is our...
We're witnessing how they're creating an in-group here by doing these actions as they consider. And that's how these groups get going. So it's not just a nice little funny phenomenon.
A thought as we go on. What we're doing now is the practice of speaking and listening. I do this on retreat. In fact, who has the mic? Could you just hold on to it, Cricket, for a sec? This is interactive meditation. So I invite you to become aware of the first time I was going to teach a weekend retreat 30 years ago or so, I called Ruth Dennis and said, oh, what'll I do? And she said, Dalink, as long as you remember your sitting bones, everything will be fine. So I invite us all to be aware of our sitting bones. We've got padded chairs, and you won't feel the bones much, but be aware of the pressure of your buttocks down into the chair. And your back against the chair if you're leaning. Feel the life in your hands. Notice that you're seeing. And notice that you're breathing. And there's probably some mood present. Notice that moods are a little more slippery than hand sensations, but you can know if it's calm or frightened or curious or whatever. And so as we'll have another few moments of people sharing thoughts. But as they speak, don't forget that you're sitting here. Don't forget that you're hearing. Notice the words as they come in, and sometimes what happens when someone is speaking, and if we have an opposing view, we don't even hear to the end of their speaking because we've gone into our rebuttal. And so to pause, to be aware of what's happening inside, to be aware, are we doing enemy imaging? Are we criticizing? And notice what the mind does. And it's not bad that it does any of these things, it's just what minds do. But to be aware of it and then come back to sitting, then we can actually hear what the person says, and we're practicing mindfulness of hearing. And similarly in the speaking, to be aware, I'm speaking. This is the emotional tone with which I'm speaking. So this isn't a tranquility practice that we're doing, but this is a very important piece of Dharma practice, to speak and listen. So there was, Cricket, you have the mic.
I guess as I'm hearing all these comments that people are making and about basically radicalization and all of that, I am now feeling more fear by far than I did initially, because it occurs to me that they could be throwing a bomb in here or, you know, being really violent. And wow, it is scary.
Thank you. An observation. Did anyone notice a little fear with that? I just a little fear myself. And I remembered, and I don't know, it's probably okay to say this, when I'm talking up here, I have this little device. It has 2 buttons on it. If I push these 2 buttons simultaneously, within a second, the police are on their way with an assault in progress. Very early on at PIMC, very early on, the furnace died out here, and we were in the living room, and I was teaching facing that way, and a fellow showed up on the stairs. And he stood there for 5 minutes or so, and then I didn't know he was there. And then he started shouting this kind of stuff. And I engaged him, and I said, you know, you're welcome, and calmly. And growing up in my family, and with all the urgent stuff I've done, of all what I do is go calm. Boom. Though I must say, as I approached the screaming guy out there, the yelling guy, I got within about 5 feet, and then you're gonna go to hell, and I felt the anger. It was like a moment of wanting, it's the testosterone, you know, I'm gonna engage. But then as soon as I backed up a few feet, so my reflex is to go calm. Sometimes it's not, well, anyway. In that instance, I went calm, and then he suddenly ran into the room and was standing right in front of me, and he said, "Would you like me to off you now or later?" And I decided, this probably isn't a wise place to sit. So I sat there for about 10 seconds while I tightened the appropriate muscles, and then I rolled up to my feet fast, and then I had my phone out, and he said, "I suppose, are you going to call the police?" And I said, "They already have." Had 5 or 10 people in the room already had. And interestingly, the men in the room were moving forward. And I said, "Let's just all hold still here." And then I said, "It's time for you to go." And then he came in here and he ran out the door and he got on his bicycle and rode away. So after that, we got these panic buttons, and it's been kind of boring to have it for 11 years and never... It's like, geez, when do we get, you know... But that is here. And as a community, we're preparing ourselves as best we can for any eventuality in every moment. Learning how to be calm, how to be loving, and possibly in the right circumstances, how to respond with, what does Marshall call it? When you do wind up using force, when you wind up to act as non-violently as one can, but if one does have to take someone down, then you try to do it with as much love and as little rancor as possible. Because there do occur circumstances in life when it does. A fellow attacked me, a bicyclist attacked me a few years ago, and it blew my mind. He came running at me, and I had him in a headlock in a second. I was like, what's this 65-year-old guy doing with this kid in a headlock? But so I don't want to belabor that too much. But it does make sense to be attentive and relaxed, because we're about as safe as human beings can be here right now, really. So there were a couple more comments, please.
Mine was, I was like paying attention to some of the different things I was feeling as it came up. You know, it came up, and I'm hearing this yelling and seeing these people, and I'm thinking, oh, this is sort of like as if we were like at an abortion.
Hold the mic close.
Oh, this is like as if we're like in an abortion clinic, and how would, you know?
Yeah.
It gave me a feeling of how those people would feel. And then, you know, I was actually thinking of giving them a bow. It was suggested that hasn't worked, and I got to thinking about it and thinking the platinum rule, that probably wouldn't work for them because the only person they probably believe in bowing to is Jesus or God in their view. And but I still was pretty wound up when I came up. It was just, I don't know what it was. It wasn't necessarily fear. It was just like, just sort of overwhelmed by, I don't know, sadness.
Yeah.
And so I came in here and did some metta practice. First I did some self-compassion, and then I did some for them, and then I did some for every being, and I was like, okay. You know, it gave me a chance to actually do some real work. So in some ways it was good.
Okay, Kate, last comment.
I think most of us have incredibly good intentions. My sense was helplessness. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to deal with the fear from pure aggression and anger and hate. I don't know what to do that's appropriate in response. And there's just such a sense of helplessness. My natural tendency is to want to go hug somebody, and somehow I sense that's not going to work there. So I'm left with a desire to be more effective, to know how do I love people who are so damaged effectively? How do I manage it?
Thank you, Kate. So, how you doing? Is there anyone here who was fearful who now is less fearful? Raise your hand. So we talk about it a little bit. Is there anyone who's more fearful? Yeah. Sabe sankara anicca, said the Buddha. All conditioned phenomena are impermanent. The event of arriving here today with the men in the sandwich boards is as far away as the dinosaurs. It's gone. To the degree that it persists in our consciousness now, it's because we're thinking about it, because the body may be still aroused about it. And so there's a strategy, and it's not denial, it is suppression. And that is, change the channel. Come home to the breath. Notice when the mind wanders. Very central in the teachings are the 5 hindrances. The mind colored by greed, wanting, wanting, wanting. The mind colored by hatred, not wanting. The mind filled with restlessness, agitation, worry, remorse, very busy mind. The mind colored by sloth and torpor, dull, sleepy, falling asleep. The mind confused or doubting. Those are the 5 hindrances. And we have multiple hindrance attacks. And we spend a lot of our time, especially early in practice, we're learning to wake up to the fact that the mind is the mind, and it's capable of any fantasy, it does lots of emotions, and it has these 5 great energy forms. In addition, there are emotions, and emotions are bioelectronic phenomena. They exist in the body, And our emotions are designed for survival. Right? When someone has a finger wagging in your face and saying, I hate you, or whatever, if it provokes anger, it's probably a good thing, because that has saved us over the millennia. The question then is, in this next stage of evolution, which has to do with love and compassion, one of the great skills is to learn to calm the system down. That we need our biological reflexes. Like when the car, oh geez, the other night I was driving down the street nearby here, and it was very black and rainy, and I didn't look left and right before starting to pull out, because obviously nothing was coming, peripheral vision and so on. There was a bicyclist who was right in front of me. He swerved and no light. But I didn't look. I would have seen him if I'd looked. And what happened? Boom! My foot hit the brake and I stopped, and he was safe and I was safe. That was a nice time for fight or flight. And for him too. His fight or flight turned on and he swerved and he didn't fall off his bike. And we waved at each other and went on. So it's important that we have all that, and flashing to anger is very useful. But how do we then land? Well, it's time-honored. It's just like the same way we'd land out of sadness, or we come home to the present moment, to this breathing right now, and discover how safe we are right here. Breathing in, breathing out. Each breath has a beginning. It rises to fullness. And these are the actual sensations of the breath in the chest and abdomen. Rises to fullness, and then it declines and vanishes. And then, as you'll notice, the mind really has a mind of its own, and it may well jump to worry or memory or critique or the mind can do anything. Our task is to learn that who or what we are is not our thoughts. It's not our emotions. We are something of infinite vastness, of boundless love and compassion. And we experience this miraculous phenomenon of mindfulness, which becomes aware of thoughts, aware of emotions. It's such a relief to not have to take every thought and emotion seriously. And attending to the breath isn't about tensing anything. It's really about relaxing and softening. Every time the mind wanders, we are granted another marvelous opportunity to wake up to that and then to come home to the breath. The stories that the mind tells form what we call our personality. Our opinions, our judgments, the ways we make meaning of things. The more we can let go of these, to just let them be what they are and then pass away, the happier we are. Doesn't mean we become passive in the world. It means that we become capable of responding to the world rather than reacting. Breathing in and knowing it.
This is Audible.
every single thing that arises in the mind disappears instantly. Learning to live in the moment of creation the present moment is what all mystical traditions point toward. And this phenomenon that we call the breath actually doesn't really exist either. What exists is a process. It starts, and then there's breathing in, breathing in, breathing in, breathing in, breathing in, breathing in, until there's fullness, and then breathing out, breathing out, breathing out. And in fact, even that's not accurate. There's not breathing in or breathing out, there's just sensations. So become more and more intimate with the sensations of life itself. Any way that the mind becomes agitated or the body becomes agitated, we simply notice it for what it is. Notice it for what it is, and then come home. And as usual, we'll transition from one form of practice to another with a gong, 2 gongs. The first says, wake up. The second says, okay, time to release oneself from the vow of sitting still. Jim, is it okay if we take a different route today? I invite you to please stand. And in honor of Ruth Dennison, let's try this. Let your hand shake, your right hand, let it shake. And then let it be your whole arm and your shoulder. Be very present in it. And then let it stop. And let's start the other hand with the baby finger first. And then the 4th finger, and then the middle finger, and then the index finger, and then the thumb. Can we still call it the index finger even though index cards are gone? We can still call that, okay. And then shake the hand and the arm. And be present in that, and be present in your feet. And then let's get the right arm back in. And let it shake. And see how fast you can make it shake. And let your shoulders get involved. And then let it stop. And then bringing the weight into the right foot, let your left foot circle and move a bit. And then let your knee bend and let your leg shake. It's the left leg shake moment. It's quite a test of balance. Ah. And then the right leg shake moment. And then both legs shake. No, I can't do that. And now both hands and the left leg. And the pelvis. And the right leg, and the head, and let your jaw be slack. And then any way that you can let your body move and shake, stretch. And be present. You're just as likely to have a profound awakening moment doing this as you are sitting in meditation, probably more. You could forget yourself for a moment and be free. All right. Now shake as fast as you can for 30 seconds. Oh, let's growl too. Woo. Whoa. That was a little scary. All right, please take a couple of minutes to stretch and then we'll come back to sitting. Right. Oh my, that's true. Could you ask Kate if there's anything we must announce today? No? Okay. Please let us bring to the altar of our hearts the people who were killed in Paris and their families. The broken-hearted, utter anguish the rage, the despair, the longing for revenge, the raw, desperate, how can my life go on? We all know this feeling, and we will probably know it again. We can say these were senseless, stupid deaths, and they were. And for the families, they're death. And in a way that would be unpopular in many circles, I invite us to bring to the altar of our hearts the young men who perpetrated this horrible act, who did it in the name of God, who did it to bring us closer to the Armageddon and to the arising of the final caliphate, so that we can all then relish in our heavenly home. They weren't insane, except in the way that fundamentalism is insane. They were deluded. They were, quote, brainwashed. They were true believers. So let us bring them to the altar of our hearts, because they were just like us. Maybe harder, but if we truly want to practice the Dharma, then we go beyond what is reflexive and normative. And at any moment we want to, we can touch this place of great spaciousness of heart through remembering that every day 125,000 people die on the earth. About every 6 days, the population of Portland passes away completely. And they die in car wrecks and in old age and strokes and childbirth. And we're a very fleeting lot. This very moment, someone is picking up the phone and being told, your mother just died, your father died, your child died. The family was killed in a bus accident, or a bomb dropped on their house, or Dad didn't wake up this morning, or. And feel the beating of your own heart, which is not a given and is temporary. Feel the preciousness, notice the remarkable preciousness of awareness in this moment, that awareness exists. And as we do this, perhaps we use these terminologies, perhaps our heart opens in compassion. Maybe we just kind of get soft and relax a bit and realize how utterly precious any moment of being alive and being together is. And notice the remarkable phenomenon of breathing. And then ever so slowly let your eyes open and be aware of seeing. And to the degree that it's comfortable, take a moment to look around and see who's here. And if your eyes happen to meet someone else's, who is it really who's looking out from behind those eyes? From the Toltec civilization, gone, right? Our life is shorter than flowers. Then shall we mourn? No. We will dance, plant gardens, dress in colors, and teach our children to make the world more beautiful because our life is shorter than flowers. Our life is shorter than flowers. Then shall we mourn? No, we shall dance, plant gardens, dress in colors, and teach our children to make the world more beautiful because our life is shorter than flowers. This little acrylic stupa has some fragments of Ruth Denison, and I like to bring it with me when I teach sometimes. It sits on the altar here. If you feel so inclined, please come up after if you want to. And if you really want to look, you can twist this off and see inside. It's actually bone, calcium leftovers. Now, of course, in many circumstances, many traditions, it would be seen heresy to do such a thing. But there's nothing more sacred about these bones than there is about this little clock that appeared here recently. It's that which was part of that phenomenon called Ruth Denison for a while. And it's a nice reminder. So, friends, I'm so glad we're here together. We really need each other. Not just at a moment like this, but all the time. Because moments like this happen to us all the time, really. But there are a few particular things I wanted to say. Had my phone on because there's a title of a book I wanted. I can't remember the fellow's name unless I look at it. Please let's use this moment of a tragedy in Paris to help us remember love and impermanence and compassion. And it's a big deal. And it's also not something to focus our lives on. The media is going to. It's going to be with us. It's going to be this. It's a media frenzy. It'll sell a lot of product. Something terribly tragic happened, and it's terrible for the families. And when we personalize it, we're much more in danger of being struck by lightning than we are of being killed by a terrorist attack. And certainly in our cars, or living in a country where there's handguns all over the place, that we can use this in a way to distract us from the fact that everything is utterly impermanent and we're scared. We're frightened of dying. So why not use it as a way to say, okay, I'm going to live. I want to tell my loved ones I love them. There's the dimension that I feel somewhat particularly qualified, I guess, having also been in a cult for 5 years. I gave my life to a guy called Sujata for 5 years, way back at the beginning. I learned a ton from him. My first 5 years of Buddhist practice. But he was a cult leader. He was a narcissistic personality, and we did all the things that happen, or not all the things, but many of the things. We felt superior to everyone else in the world, really. And we lied a lot, and we having trouble hearing. There's the hearing devices there if anyone needs them. And what it comes to, in a way, there's believing that one has the secret, one has the path to freedom and happiness and eternal life and so on. And the more insecure one is, the more one may have to convert others. So whenever there's proselytizing, there's insecurity. And if one has an experience, powerful emotional experience, say, and it's defined as, I've seen the light. Actually, I've seen the light as a first jhana experience. It's kind of the beginning of a particular level of spiritual practice. But then if one has, let's say, bad habits like addictions or violence or something, and then somehow or another you manage to get a lid on them, you really have to stay believing that was the moment when you were totally saved, because you could fall back into your catastrophic circumstances. But even that's not where I want to really go. I've been very curious for a long time. How do people stay human, loving, and compassionate even when terrible things happen? And there are many, many examples of that in the world. I think Mrs. Beale is still alive. There was a couple in South Africa 20 years ago, white couple. Their daughter was abducted, raped, and killed by 3 black men. And they were caught, and Mrs. Beale went to the prison and started visiting them. And after about 2 or 3 years, she petitioned for 2 of them to be released from prison into her custody. And then they were released, and they lived with the couple. I forget their first names, but they spoke here in the States numerous times. Family therapy conventions and other things. And what she said when I heard her, if I saw them together, just the wife after the man had died, and one of the young men, she said to him, "When I first came to see you in the prison, I was praying for you to die. And then I realized it wasn't you that I wanted to die, it was the part of you that could possibly have abducted, raped, and killed my daughter." And the Beals and these 2 young men set about creating a rape education and prevention program that had thousands of people involved around South Africa. There are lots of stories like this. How do people stay human? How do people restrain the mammalian urge for revenge? How do they actually move to love? We have one model of that with Jesus on the cross. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. We have models from the Tibetan monks who were captured by the Chinese. One Tibetan former doctor of the Dalai Lama was captured by the Chinese and tortured, and the Dalai Lama asked him, "Were you ever concerned about yourself?" And he said, "Well, there were times when I felt my compassion weakening, and then I was worried." And there's actually quite solid research about some of the Tibetan monks who were tortured horrifically and who have or had no post-traumatic stress disorder. What? Somehow or another they maintained profound meaning through that. I just finished reading a book by Miko Peled, who's an Israeli, whose grandfather was one of the men who signed the Israeli Declaration of Independence, and his father was a famous general who became converted partway through his life and became a peace activist. And this fellow Miko was converted. His sister, his beautiful little niece, was blown up by a teenager Palestinian wearing a suicide vest. And his sister, when the press was there and the intelligentsia of Israel came, because this was an important person, she said, "I don't want any revenge. No mother would want another mother to experience this." And there's the political piece where she said, "And I hold the occupation to be the cause of this." And I've just started listening to another book. Funny, it makes me quite teary, this research I'm doing. "I Shall Not Hate" by Dr. Izzeldin Abulaish, who is a Palestinian physician trained in Harvard, whose 3 daughters were killed by the artillery coming into Gaza in the last horrific assault. I shall not hate. And the common thread is I want to talk to people on the other side. There's an organization in Israel, Palestine, of parents who have lost children. And when they get together, it's always the same, right? We're just people who've lost our children. And there are these ideologies. There are beliefs and ideologies, and there is in us human beings a tendency to create fundamentalist mythologies. There are fundamentalists Christians. There are fundamentalist Jews. Right? They have a mythology of the land belonging to them, and they're going to take it back. Even though there's no direct link of ownership, no right of return. There are obviously, as we saw yesterday or heard yesterday, fundamentalist Islamists. And there are fundamentalist Buddhists. I meant to look up his name. There's that monk in Western... it makes me so sad. In Western Burma, that is preaching hate and kill the Muslims. He's not pulling his punches. It's like kill them. They're lesser than us. And I've done just a little research on the textbooks in Israel and Palestine. People have studied them, and they're designed to create separation and hatred, as they were in Ireland, the north and the south. So we teach our children to otherize in the name of something. Now this, of course, isn't other people. This is us. I mean, this is ordinary humans like us. We are otherizing Islam in this country, and oh my, it's gonna continue to get worse with this. They identified a finger from one of the bombers in Paris. He sneaked in with the refugees. What's that going to do with the refugee issue now? There's going to be a lot of room for love and compassion here. So, there's no, in the Burmese example, there isn't, it's kind of like these guys out here, there's no way to stop them from doing that because we have this practice of free speech. And the Buddhist hierarchy in Burma does not have control over that monk, and so he is. I mean, and I don't know. It's not much covered in our press, but they actually are killing Muslims, and they're deporting whole ethnic groups in Burma, and it happens everywhere. I come from Irish descent, and not so long ago it was an Irish need not apply. So I love the title of this book I've just started, I Shall Not Hate. I had a moment of hatred outside when that fellow, I got too close, and he pointed at me. He was like, ugh. And it was like, there was a moment of, I can take him, right? Probably stupid if I tried, but I did get that bicyclist. So, I shall not hate. I shall not hate doesn't mean I shall not feel all my feelings, however. And it's funny, is superstition. If one of my children were killed in a hate context, it'd be very challenging practice, right? The revenge impulse would be there, certainly the fear, and it would all be there. And then the question would be, can I remember my heart? Can I remember my Buddha nature? I mean, it happens even at the level of intimate relationship, in conflict with Jennifer sometimes. There's this, I'm out of here. It's like, who is that? Right? It's the same dynamic that otherizes, creates an enemy image, and also the enemy image can create a story so fast, right? I read late last night. I should have gone to bed, but I read late last night. Someone sent me a link to it. It's in the Atlantic on what ISIS really is. And I highly recommend reading that article. It's very sobering. That ISIS is following ancient Islamic. It's like following the book, the Armageddon book in the Old Testament, that they really believe that the end of the world is coming, and that it's their job, that once the caliphate is formed, they must emigrate. They must go there, and then the idea is to pull the great Satan, I forget what the term is, but to pull the army of Rome, they say, to a particular place, it's farmland west of Raqqa, their capital, and that it's there that the final battle will take place before the end of the world. This is Quranically correct. Just like the stuff in the Bible is biblically correct. Right? It's contradictory, and there's terrible violence in the Bible, and you must stone people and so on. These are fundamentalists who have brought this mythology back to horrible life. And when one dies fighting for God, one goes to heaven. So there's very little fear. So there is a political, military, etc. There's a mess that there are people who will need to respond to that. I've been when I think about Siddhartha and the story of his life, he was being trained to be in Obama's shoes right now, or in Prime Minister Hollande's shoes. And a person in those shoes has certain responsibilities. Siddhartha said, not my job. He had a different job. And for those of you that don't know the story, he was born, and then the soothsayer said, he's either going to be a world ruler or a world teacher. And he abdicated his kingdom and became a world teacher. So, I have no idea, of course. I'm so glad I don't have to make decisions like that I'm not in any position and I don't even particularly want to opine about what should be done. But I do think that what should be done in this heart is to feel very deeply, to remember the grief, and to remember to love the people that are within arm's length. And to comfort this organism to not get freaked out, to not become reactive, to not turn this into more than it actually is, and it's a little scary to say, but to not turn this into more than it actually is in this life. because my job, my mission statement is to live as fully as I can according to the Eightfold Path, and to share that as best I can. So I don't see how it would help the world for me to become enraged or highly reactive or despairing or this is a really bad thing that happened. In fact, in terms of, there's 1/12 the number of people in France that there are in the United States. And so this loss is comparable to the Twin Towers. And look how we as a nation have used the Twin Towers to become frightened and aggressive. And so I guess the main thing I want to underline here is, how do we use the horrible events of the world and our lives to become more loving? To recognize compassionately that we could be any of the actors in this drama. I saw from my cult experience, I could be one of those young men off or my son could, my daughter could. We're not immune from falling into brainwashed craziness. I don't want to even call it craziness. Information disease. That the kids in Southern Ireland were raised to hate people from Northern Ireland and vice versa. And it's the same. It's the same everywhere. The Hutu and the Tutsi, and we can be trained to hate the other side. Sadly, the polarization that's happening here about foreigners and building walls along the border in Mexico. The net immigration from Mexico in the last year is 0. There's not a flood of people coming in from Mexico. How substantial is our pile of chant sheets back there? Could you look, Damien? Do we have a bunch? We haven't used them in a long time. Not very many, are there? Huh? Do we have enough? Actually, let's just do a call and response anyway. Among the things that the Buddha said about his teachings were, they will die out. There will come a time when this disappears, and the objects of veneration will become household kitsch, basically. We got a lot? Yeah. Let's just not use them for now. People will stop rising before dawn to practice. The precepts will cease being followed. How many of you know the 5 precepts, the 5 guiding precepts? So clearly a minority, a perfect moment. I keep having these waves of tears coming through back in here. It's so important that we love each other. God. Remember Joanna Macy, remarkable very mature teacher of our time, who said she was traveling around the world some years ago when I practiced with her, doing despair and empowerment workshops. Some of us who grew up in the era of the Cold War were so frightened about nuclear weapons. I always used to know where downtown was because I knew that's where the flash would come from. And I don't have that anymore, blessedly. But what she did was she helped us grieve. She helped us come into contact with our sense of terror and grief, which is ubiquitous in human beings. And to grieve our grief, and she said with great vehemence, grieve your grief. Otherwise you'll turn on your friends when the going gets rough. Right? To feel the deep, dark feelings that we have. To become, therefore, loving of ourselves and therefore of the world. But back to the precepts. The Buddha said that when his teachings are dying out, the precepts will no longer be known. And also, it's actually been a very useful touchstone for me. Any teaching that doesn't include the precepts is profoundly incomplete. Because the precepts are the way we get along with each other. The first. I undertake the rule of training, or I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from killing other humans. Or from killing. Imagine if we took that as a planet, change everything. There's a positive statement that actually I wrote these positive, they're implied, but I wrote these 20 or 30 years ago. I aspire to become kind and generous to all beings. Kind and of service to all beings. So restrain the impulse to kill and become kind. Now we can make these super refined, like I so won't kill that I won't flea bomb the house when the dogs get fleas or whatever. And we have to. It's about the purpose of the precepts is consciousness raising, to help us realize that there's a price for killing. There's actually a fun little article on robertbeatty.com called, it's under resources, called Killing Ratty. And we had rats in the house, and I decided I'd save them. I'd catch them in a live trap, and they didn't like the live trap. Oh, I got into catching them when one ran across my daughter's foot. It's like, okay, I get it, they gotta go. But it didn't work to catch them, so then I ended up getting the rat zapper. It's an electronic device. And with the first ratty, I was so moved, and I examined it, and so on. By the time it got to the 7th ratty, I wasn't doing careful burials. I was just putting them in the trash. It's like, enough. But I watched as I became inured to killing. Second precept. I undertake the rule of training, or the training of the heart, to remain from taking that which is not freely given. Now notice, these are not thou shalt not steal. These are consciousness-raising practices. I undertake the rule of training to not take that which is not freely given. And the wording is really diabolical, because it gets really down to fine. It's like, I'd really like to take this. I like this pen. But you really need to ask. I know my doctor's office has these giveaway pens, and they're intended to give away, but I like them, and I lose them. So when I go, I ask, can I have one of these? And I always say, of course, but it feels so much better to ask. Positive statement of that is, I aspire to become generous to all beings. And you can flourish that. It's like, I want to become really generous so that when people think of one, they think, wow, she was really generous, or she is really generous. Third, I undertake the rule of training or the training of the heart to refrain from sexual acts which cause harm. Sexuality is one of the great energies of life. Right? I was talking with someone recently about Kinsey. How many of you have seen Kinsey or read the book? A worthy movie. We owe Kinsey a lot because the freedom and openness and actually knowledge about sexuality, it's thanks to him. It was all very under the covers, so to speak. But we can harm ourselves and harm others, because just like we go kind of crazy about other things, sometimes we really lose our moorings around passion. In fact, I like to ask this. Please raise your hand if you've ever really gone nuts and done harm to yourself or another around sexuality. That's amazing. It's a very low number. I think there's some denial in the room. One can do damage to oneself, being sexual when you don't want to, or when it's just not the right moment. But, on the other hand, the positive statement, I aspire to use the great energy of libido to bring love, connection, and beauty into the world. So it's not bad or good, it's just it's incredible energy. Fourth, I undertake the rule of training to refrain from false, harmful, misleading speech, gossip, slander. That we can cause incredible pain to ourselves. We can destroy a relationship, gone. We can harm a person's reputation, or we can do damage to a marriage so profoundly. In my first marriage, it was in the 70s, and we fell into a belief. It was a kind of cultic, therapeutic sort of belief, quasi-therapeutic, that it really was okay to yell and scream at each other. You got to get it out. So we had these horrible fights with each other. A glass or two of wine, and then fight. Not physically, but just really, and we damaged that relationship really beyond repair, I think. That was an idea. It was part of the zeitgeist. Speech can also, the positive statement of speech, I aspire to use speech to create community, harmony, connection, and understanding. That I will learn nonviolent communication to the best of my ability, and I'll restrain. And when it's time to not say something, I'll try to not say it. When it comes time to not push the button on the text that I know is really destructive, don't push the button. Whenever I speak of this, I remember one several years ago that Jen and I were in conflict on, and I was right. And I wrote this really clear text, and I thought, so, is it true, timely, kind? Oh, no, it's not. It's true. It's true. But it's not kind. But I felt compelled to push it. And lo and behold, it didn't destroy the relationship, blessedly, but she did disappear electronically for about a day, till we got home. Harmful. Should have restrained it. And then the fifth, in gossip, restraining gossip. Fifth, I undertake the rule of training, the training of the heart, to refrain from intoxicants, intoxicating actions that dull the mind. And the positive statement is, it's my intention to cultivate mindfulness, concentration, and the Eightfold Path. As I was saying this just now, I was thinking, well, ISIS is kind of over the edge on the precepts, aren't they? Though their belief is that part of the belief is, I will use torture and I will kill horrifically because it will bring the conflict to a quick end, and therefore I'm being compassionate. There will be less overall suffering because I'm going to scare the bejeebies out of the enemy. It's part of their belief. Taking that which is not freely given, well, anytime you take other people's land, or anything like that, it's taking that which is not freely given. When you kidnap people and so on. Third, sexual acts. They're using rape as part of their methodology and their ideology. It's okay for them. Speech, well, I'd say their speech is rather harsh, harsh and untrue. And intoxication. Behind the scenes, there's a lot of intoxication. They're not supposed to be drinking, but there's tons of it apparently. And also other drugs. Young men gone berserk. So what's the outcome of a tradition that is so out of touch with the precepts? Chaos. So how can we take this as a reminder? You know, I think I really want to clean up my speech a bit, or I want to clean up, what about this? So, children playing safely, happily outside. We're in heaven. This is heaven. We have enough to eat this morning. We have good friends here. Our health is good enough we could walk here today. This is really about as good as it gets. So let's be grateful. Be grateful meaning let's land here. We were even sent a message. We were sent messengers this morning of just how pained human minds can be. So we have a few minutes, maybe 8. Does anybody have anything you'd like to add or respond? Well, let me ask first, how are you feeling? How's the fear level? Anybody frightened still? Gone. Good. Letting the past fall away is such a good practice. Right? It's over. Doesn't mean be ignorant and not learn from it, but it's over. Paul?
I know that you like to quote Mr. Rogers quite frequently.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to paraphrase this one because I don't have the quote in front of me, but I saw it last night. And he said, whenever there was a tragedy, his mother would say, when you witness a tragedy, look for the people who are helping. There were always people who are going to be helping.
Yeah.
in the balance and along the same lines. As you were talking this morning, Robert, I thought about all the churches and synagogues and all the different places of worship where people were doing just this morning.
Yeah.
It's like taking the time to reflect on how to bring more love into the world and how to help heal. And I'm still convinced that the way to do it is one person at a time.
Yep.
That if you love one another and take care of each other, it'll help.
That's one of the things that I'm being affirmed in the reading that I've been doing, that it's meeting the person you think is the other and really meeting. There was that wonderful wizard genius, Marshall Rosenberg, who had the capacity of getting into groups of people that were really hating each other and being so profoundly compassionate that he could actually get them to pass that barrier. Devoted.
I think when I walked in this morning, something that I have perspective on now that I wasn't able to completely identify then was that there was a real sort of inner striving to try and figure out how to react to the people outside. And I think it was similar to what my reaction was to the Paris incidents, which was, what's the right opinion to have here? What's the right reaction? And I think I'm feeling now an understanding of not needing to decide like a moral A or B, to more kind of be in touch with individual feelings or the individual moment that's right in front of me.
Yeah. Thank you. Off to the right.
I was just thinking about what Pete Seeger had inscribed in his banjo, which was, "This instrument surrounds hate and forces it to surrender."
That's nice. That's lovely.
I think I just want to say thank you, Robert, for handling this the way you did. When I came, I almost got back in my car. I just felt like my fight-flight system was in hyper gear, and I kind of made myself stay. I did ask them to lock the door, but I just feel so much better.
I'm glad.
Thank you.
I finally figured out what the motion was that I was having a hard time putting a name on it. It was I was feeling violated, like somebody had sort of was in my space or attacking me. So I was feeling more violated than anything. And there's another piece to this, and I just went blank.
Can I just nudge you a little bit? Can I?
Yeah.
So violated is an interpretive statement.
Okay.
What's the feeling? Scared, frightened, outrage, irritation.
maybe irritation, maybe the more likely. It was just like, which goes into that whole thing of having my space, like this is supposed to be a peaceful place, and having that, like you're invading my space.
Yeah.
And, then I said I came in here and, was pretty wound up and did the meta practice. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes is just Mother Teresa's, the reason we have no peace in the world is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if this is appropriate or not. I've been coming here for about 3 years, and I've always appreciated the beauty of the altar, the flowers and the statues. I've never noticed that statue in the far right corner before, and he seemed to be staring at me, and he seems to have a spear, and I have no idea who he is, so I was wondering if you could tell us a little about him.
It's him. Jizo. Jizo is very big in Japan. He is the archetype of babies in the womb, pregnant women, and crossroads. And ceremony that I've done numerous times on retreat, for the ceremony for the water baby, for our babies that don't make it to birth. And he's the one part of the ceremony sometimes is to make clothing for our lost babies and to dress him in the clothing of our lost babies. And he protects. He has these rings on his walking stick that it's like bear bells. Keeps the dangerous creatures away, so nobody gets harmed. Jizo, he just sits over there in the corner. There's a place in the bottom for cremains, which we don't have in him, but that's his. Yeah, nice.
Did you say crossroads?
Crossroads.
This is like the moments of transition in our life, like
Birthing, deathing. Yeah. And also in Japan, literally crossroads. There's always Jizo at the crossroads.
Robert, this is another one. I was sure that was the Eiffel Tower.
Would you talk in the top?
I was sure that was the Eiffel Tower that you had there, not...
Yes, all right. It is. Funny.
The statement that you made about how we're susceptible to being fundamentalists.
Yeah.
I was actually, like, if there's such thing as a culture that we kind of, most of us represent here, I was raised in that community, and at age 20, I became a born-again Christian for 12 years, and it really was it took me about 8 years almost just to get all that stuff out of me, even though I had left it. And I almost joined a mystical kind of Buddhist cult last spring, and it was like, I am so susceptible to this. It is amazing after all the education that I've had. I'm in my 40s now, and it's like, it really is such human nature to become a part of something very powerful and sensational and feeling like I'm better than other people. And
Right.
so, it's sad, but at the same time, it's like, I don't blame them for being a part of this, especially if they grew up in it. But as somebody who made a conscious choice as an adult to have a total paradigm shift and become a total conservative, voted for George W. Bush and voted for him again.
Bless you, my son.
Yes, thank you.
Behind you.
What we cannot do here in the United States is actually be a direct help to the Syrian refugees and things like that. We're not really in direct contact like the Europeans are, and they're they're taking a big risk by taking these people in the danger, but they're willing to do it. And here in the United States, we're talking about there's no real action that we can take here that would really help them directly. And I wish I could, as a nurse, I'd like to go over there and do that, but there's no real avenues to do that, take the risk and to put yourself out there. And I wish there is, and I hope those opportunities come. But we don't need to have that here. We're so far away.
And there is plenty of racism, sexism, ageism, financialism here that we can find our niche where we can practice being supportive, as I know you do in your own way. Well, please let us form a large circle. Yeah. Well, this is the circle of great enlightenment, where the secret teachings are flow from hand to hand. If any of you would like to come and join us at the center circle and help us blow out the candle, you're welcome. What? Oh, the mic. Oh, God, forgot it.
And it's so cute today.
It's so cute. It is gone. Oh, the mic is
It might be over here.
Come on in. I'm going to dust you off, dust you off, dust you off. Everyone gets dusted off. There you go. Put your head in. There we go. All right. All right. So, isn't it nice we have hands? Because we can touch each other. I think brothers should not be allowed to sit behind sisters. Or vice versa. There. So, we've been reflecting on love. Love in which there's room for everything. There's room for hate. There's room for fear. Think of Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season. So please let us think a kind, loving thought to the person on our right. Give their hand a little squeeze. What would be your deepest prayer or wish for the person on your right? And the other way to the person on your left. Give this hand a squeeze. Passing through a lifetime. And please let us include in our circle our friends and family. The people in Paris we've been speaking about. Everybody. We're all in these fragile, time-bound human bodies. So capable of so much love and also quite the opposite. So we have our ancient ritual with the ancient pom-pom. Who are our singers today? 1, 2. Can you get together? Do you want to join in too, sweetie? Yeah, okay. So hold it between you. And when you're ready, there we go. sharing very nicely. Yep. All right. When you're ready, who's going to start? All right. Go.
May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Yay, good job. May I have the microphone, please? Thank you. Well, and now we're going to practice patience for 15 seconds. Just, it's hard. All right, all right, you can all take out your phones now. So I'm going to count, and on the count, the usual count, there comes the opportunity for everyone in the room to blow out this candle. And of course, afterwards, please join us for hospitality, coffee, tea, and goodies. Another moment of patience. Isn't it hard? 1, 2, 3. Yay. Thank you all. So, thanks for coming. Very much appreciate your being here. Thank you to the folks joining us on the internet. May we all be peaceful and bring peace to the people around us. To the food. Hi. How was the morning in Kidland?